Hello everybody. Today we're going to talk about the experience layer of the decentralized internet. I'm Christy. I'm the founding director of the Cardstack project. So we're going to cover quite a number of topics. We're going to begin talking about the problems. What about the application market or app or software market today that makes way for the possibility that decentralization becomes not only an important tool, but also an inevitable movement. And then we're going to talk about why it's important to think about decentralization around this idea that is user-centric. So yes, it is about centralizing around the user, each individual person's sovereignty. How does that work? And we're going to talk a little bit about the Cardstack architecture, which is simultaneously a set of software we've been developing in the last 3 years, but also a protocol that we're now designing to orchestrate and create a new economic and a product reality around how people will interact in a way that leverages not only crypto economics, which is a fancy way of saying that using cryptography to establish incentive structure so people can actually work together, but how those incentive structure either augment or improve real-world economics, which is basically saying, how do I pay my bills? How do I grow? How do I become meaningful, contribute in society, and how do I get rewarded for things that I've done? And finally, we're going to talk a little bit broader about how this set of concerns, if we bring it together and we can really find the coherence and find that kind of alignment, can be the roadmap for mass adoption for decentralized technology and blockchain technology in particular. So let's jump right in. So let's start with the problem. And this is not a bad problem to have. The truth is, when you open up your phone today, you see all these amazing applications asking for your attention. They all have notifications and beautiful interfaces and animations and all the great tools that Steve Jobs created this iPhone, and then we have iterated and improved on this. Many developers jumping in and really redefining what this supercomputer in your pocket can do. And it can help you communicate. It can help you book flights. It can do things that professional photographer can dream of doing only with a bag of equipment. Now you can, with one iPhone or an Android phone, do amazing things. It's obviously, with the advent of blockchain, define a new way of dealing with financial transactions for your own payments or other type of personal finance. And that list goes on and on. And these applications, while being powerful, I think we're now starting to see that they exist in these silos, which means each of these worlds that you tap into when you open and tap on this open button on your own home screen confines you to a rich but limited universe of the capability of that piece of software. And these silos work together in some way, and I think it's better on Android than iPhone, where they can get connected together, but largely, each of these applications are defined by, more often than not, the company that made it, whether that's a company that's a big international company like Facebook and Google, or a unicorn, a startup that has found one particular slice, whether it's Lyft or Uber, where you can book a car through them and they can orchestrate all of them, but you're in their world. It's the world that you tap into, you're opening in their silos. And this application silos create a situation where users have to think about, which chat app should I open to talk to this person in my life? And that silo continues as far as which app for what bank account, which app for what currency, and it gets pretty confusing to a point where we know that users, on average users, install 0 new apps on their phone per month, on average. People are saturated. Unless you have made it to the top 25 app, this is the reality. This amazing dynamic aspects of new supercomputer on your pocket has now become a stagnant collection of about 25 apps. When we zoom away from the personal utility of mobile application and we look at what happens to people who are using web application or subscription-based application, sometimes called software as a service, SaaS, you see a similar scenario of silos of subscriptions. If you want to collaborate using a program like Slack, you want to run an e-commerce store, you want to message other people, you want to run a content publishing for social and for your own website, you're likely figuring out how to balance all of these subscriptions that you have to deal with Each one of them represent a different pricing model, a different user model. Did you invite to my Slack? Should we do my Slack or your Slack? Am I using that account? Should I give that person an account? It's very expensive. And all of these things require most people running, modern businesses will have 15 to 20 of these subscriptions. They have to rationalize and deal with the passwords to make it all work. Now, with that being said, the capability you get if you're able to make all these silos work for you is amazing. It's better than any tool the Fortune 500 company from 10 or 15 or even 20 years ago ever had at their disposal. But it is getting a little out of hand. So when people talk about blockchains and the capability and the possibility of these new types of features that you can do, blockchain is a new jurisdiction. Blockchain will redefine identity, so it's not owned by one company or two companies, but it's something that you have sovereignty on. Blockchain will redefine advertising and allows you to leverage the crowd to predict and trade and do all kinds of things without the limitation of the existing corporate business model of the digital superpowers. And this is an exciting new development and new capability that we should embrace. But here's the thing. With each of these new capabilities on a blockchain, which comes with a currency, or a distributed or decentralized app or dApp, you have to deal with the fact that they are increasing and adding to this silo problem. And there's one additional thing, which is that each one of these dApp likely have their own tokens. So if you're really trying to extend your business to use digital jurisdiction and decentralized storage, you probably have to keep track of all of the prices of all of the tokens that you would need just to be able to do your work. If you look at this as a combination of not just I live on the blockchain, but that I live in the world and blockchain essentially become more and more part of it, you're dealing with a stack, a set of tools that will probably span what exists on your device. These are the native apps, the mobile apps, what's on the cloud that you have membership and account on, and what is merging within the blockchain that you participate on as a member. And this is a layered architecture that hopefully, if we can think about how to turn them into cohesive experiences, we can then really take advantage of all of these tools at our disposal without creating the confusion that it is today. So if you talk to people who are who have been new to blockchain or really savvy about cloud and software, they are orchestrating all of these apps today. This is not a new technology, they just know how to do it. They will find a way to link a chat system that they're using with a CRM system to reach the right person to get the right thing taken care of. They will be able to use blockchain as an augmentation of existing workflow they're doing if they find the right people in the overlapping community. They can find out how to use search and trading, and with dealing with hardware wallet, find a way to do the type of business transaction that makes sense to them with the jurisdiction that's friendly to them. And they are going to obviously able to leverage the amazing power of coordination and peer-to-peer to be able to create content and storage. But then eventually that guy with the sunglasses, that guy has to be able to see this on the web somewhere, because at the end of the day, most people are still on the web and not on the blockchain. So people have been orchestrating and finding a way to connect the tools and app they're using. And in so doing, they're creating this reality that while it works for them, it's unlikely to scale or to grow into the mass market of everybody who is doing Instagram or using a phone and using messaging. This is too hard because it requires too much skill. And our sense, and this is our proposal, is that there's an opportunity for us to think about, can we build what we call an experience layer on top of all these apps and dApps and cloud app and SaaS apps and mobile capability, so that a regular user, not the savvy early adopter, can find a way to make sense of what's going on the blockchain as well as what is going on today in their lives and bring it all together for them. And that's what we call the experience layer. It is like everything else that is a layer that basically makes it easy to do. We had this problem before once. When the web first came, everything was decentralized, everybody has a web server, and it was pretty hard to use. People found lists and bookmarks, and eventually a couple of companies, namely Google being the most successful one, said, you know what, I'm going to create a discovery layer. I'm going to index the web and give you a front door to the web. The problem is, as that front door, this layer becomes more and more prevalent, it created a situation where you cannot go to the web without going through one of these channels. And I think it's very well known that we are at the tail end of that amazing new experience on top of the web that creates a centralization that while it gets the job done, gets somewhat uncomfortable. So as we think about building an experience layer, we may want to consider that this type of architecture need to have the type of thoughtfulness about the future. What would it look like at the end of the day? And what we want to do is to make sure that even if we build a beautiful layer in front of this experience, that the user is at the center of it. It's not some company, you are not a passive participant, you're an active sovereign person. And that's what we see here, is that decentralization is really a re-centralization of everything about the internet around the user. But the user has to be represented or have an agent act on their behalf or have a tool of which they can act through. And that's where we see the opportunity to build a new concept, which we call a hub, a personal hub, where the user essentially communicates with all the different apps and services, whether it is cloud-based or mobile or blockchain-based, where they can then say, this is me, I want to connect myself to all these capabilities, all those icons you've seen in the previous slide. But one way to make it more tangible is to say, regardless of where it is coming from, whether it's from your phone or from a blockchain, we have this concept of called cards, which is a small unit of information that you can see and you can save, you can manipulate, you can own. And then from that card, you can do actions, you can trigger, you can chain, and that will propagate its action to the actual application at play. So this allows us to make it easy to understand that no matter where it comes from, it looks similarly and is yours to own. And people say, well, what is a card? That's such a difficult concept. But for most people who have been using mobile phone, they're already making cards all day long. And that's a screenshot. When you see a piece of information on an app that you're launching, a web page you're going to, a link you can share, and you want to make it physical, so it's shareable and savable and givable and grantable and manipulatable, you take a screenshot and that becomes a card. Right? And that card is saved to you, you get on a plane, airplane mode on, it's still there. And that's the amount of power without any not connected messages that feels very, very good. Except that image is dead, it's not connected to anything. And with a new opportunity to build a new architecture around the decentralized internet, we can rethink maybe something that works like a screenshot, but is still alive. You can still go to it. If it's connected, it will give you new information. So let's reorient this diagram a little bit and see what that will look like. All we basically say is that users have this opportunity to see whether there's some sort of message or some sort of purchase or some sort of receipt. This is the type of abstraction that they get, which is very physical and very real, doesn't require you to understand blockchain. And underneath that is a set of services and apps and you call it standards or protocol that then communicates with whatever branded application that powers it. And some of these branded applications could be based on the cloud. Some of them could be blockchain-based application. And the great thing about this approach is that we can do what we call progressive decentralization, which is start with things that the user's already using, account you already have on the web, on a cloud service, and you make those into cards so you can manipulate and play with them and understand what they look and what they will look like. And we'll talk more about the affordance of card in a little bit. But then once the user is comfortable with interacting with cards that reflects data they already have in the system they're using, they can now easily go into a new way and say, hey, a new payment method that may use a decentralized app, a cryptocurrency. It looks exactly the same, but it taps into this new network, new protocol. And obviously, we can't forget that every day that goes by with Apple and Google and other manufacturers and phone manufacturers adding features, your phone is becoming more and more active participant and active reflection of your digital life from within your control with this cloud service that backs it or blockchain service that replicates or represent you. We want to be able to leverage those APIs for things like digital signature, facial recognition, but in the way that the user controls. If we can orchestrate that under the card UI, as we have presented that, the user can now switch for different things they need, whether it's enterprise system or trading or accounting, from one type of system on the cloud to another one on the blockchain. The key is that we keep what the user experience is the same through this progressive decentralization effort, which may take multiple years. And that's how you get the mass market into the blockchain world and the value it creates. Now, let's step back a little bit and define what decentralization really means. So when people talk about decentralization, they sometimes talk about how the protocol exists without a central authority or whatever it might be. But let's be more concrete from a user perspective. There's really a couple of ways for you to use an application, and then you can say, am I using a decentralized application? The first, the most obvious one, and this predated even Facebook, when people were using peer-to-peer applications, right? Skype was a famous peer-to-peer application that allows you to chat before Google Hangout and other type of more centralized messaging system came in. And the idea of peer-to-peer application is that your computer, a desktop usually, contains all of the code to not only provide the user experience, but also provide the logic so that it can then connect directly to a decentralized protocol, whether that's blockchain or not, and then there's no cloud. Nobody's hosting anything. There's no website that goes to your application, connects to all the other applications around the peers on the network directly. And that allows you to not need jumping over the idea that there is someone in the cloud providing a service on your behalf. But the reason why peer-to-peer kind of got out of favor is that there's a lot of convenience to the other approach, which I call the mobile approach and the open web approach. The mobile approach is simply this. Not every single feature that you can do in a peer-to-peer app would be approved in an app store. So, and with the capability and the integration that you get on the mobile app, what we want to be able to do is to say, let's build this very rich native app and then connect to a hub, an API, a type of proxy for your identity, and that identity, that hub communicates on your behalf. And that is the architecture where you're not totally peer-to-peer. You need something runs in the cloud, whether it's Google Cloud or whatever it might be. And in our version, we can run a personal cloud for you that acts as a reflector of your messages. But you still have a lot of power. But if you're saying, I just want to go to a web page, right, this guy, I just want to come and type in www.something, then you want to be able to take the same exact application framework that generated the peer-to-peer and the mobile experience and say, can we make a website with this framework? Well, this turns out, I think, to be extremely important for mass market adoption, which is to say that if you don't have a way to get people from where they know and where they are, when that is on the web or on native app, it's going to be very hard for them to discover the capability and advantages of the peer-to-peer approach. So in designing Cardstack, one of the things we decided to do is to make sure that you have the same code that actually allows you, whether you're going from peer-to-peer to open web, or you're starting using Cardstack on the web and you start and say, hey, I want to have more control and more sovereignty. Can I install? And you install a desktop app that actually turns you into a direct participant using a blockchain term, a full node on the network. And it's up to you to decide whether you want more control and willing to go with the inconvenience or the additional work you need to do, or more convenience if your business or the network want to get more people on board. And that's essentially what this idea of choosing your level of decentralization really means. Now, to do this, we need to isolate the part that is actually moving back and forth between the cloud, the blockchain, and your local machine, or desktop otherwise. And this part is what we call the rotational point for each user, which is the hub of the user's life around these cards. And this hub basically serve as a kind of rotational data carrier between what the user experience, whether it's in peer-to-peer, mobile, and open web, and where the data is coming from, whether that's local data stored on your computer or a cloud data or blockchain records that you have submitted or published to those databases. And that rotation around the hub is how you act and respond and create new reality and workflows. And we follow a method called command query responsibility separation. So command means you make a change in the world. Query means I want to know what happened with my changes and other people's changes so I can create a consistent view of the universe for myself. So I can act on these multitude of factors of whether my accounting system has updated something or my blockchain wallet has updated something or someone has sent me a message through a private messaging bus. That all needs to come together for you to make that decision. And for us, this is a little more detail on the architecture of Cardstack Hub. We've created an architecture, and this is something that we have been building for the last 3 years, where through a consistent API, a set of writer, messenger, middleware, and index and searchers, we're able to integrate more than one type of plugins, some of which are things that people already know. And with the authentication to control whether that's coming from Git, which is something we've made a lot of investment on. Every person can have their own state of what they care about on version and share with the person they choose. And also with blockchain. And I choose to share with this network of people so that we all know the consistent state of what's going on. But this also expected with traditional databases, with SQL databases that we decide to share, with web services through Node.js, which is our integration framework, to update other data sources and other databases in exchange of these actions. So by building a plugin network, we can bring more and more of the capability of both the decentralized and the centralized internet into this common hub infrastructure for a user. And the authentication piece is not to be ignored, right? You want to be able to say that, can I do this? Is this something I'm permitted to do? To have a consistent way where your authority, whether that's driven by private key or password, to be able to make sense to someone say, can I make this change? Do I have jurisdiction? Can I make the thing I want to make happen without someone's approval? And sometimes the answer is yes, and sometimes the answer is no. So be able to know what you can do allows to orchestrate a type of workflow that allow for secure interaction and transactional things that really matter. But the cool thing about all of these plugin architectures sitting behind the hub is that on top of this, you don't really worry about any of this thing. You just ask the question, what do you like to do with all this data that you can query that is uniform, and you can now tell stories in a narrative sense, to find things, create your own personal news feed, to chat with people, not just for fun, but to be able to negotiate deals where the end result of that transaction is a licensing multi-hundreds of $1,000 million transaction, register on the blockchain or register with an enterprise system. And those workflow may require multiple people to sign up, multiple people improve, and create a situation where we validate who everybody is until they're able to do what they need to do. All of these capability, all of these UI, if you can say, are not just like, oh, it's a pretty face on top of the blockchain. It really depends on a deep understanding of how you can orchestrate these moving parts, then to provide a simple experience on top. And we're glad to say that we've worked on this vision for a long time. So all the plugin you see here, from Bitcoin to Docker and Hyperledger at various level of maturity, it's actually already been built and will be open source by the end of September. About 80% of this is already open source in GitHub/Cardstack and a monorepo/Cardstack underneath that. So you can take a look at that and get a sense of the breadth and the range and the approaches we have. And there's a nice README here written by our lead developer, Ed Faulkner, that will hopefully get you on board of exactly what the approach is and what direction you're taking. So that's a lot of information for those of you who are not developers or technical in nature, but it is important in technology to understand that that's what we're working with. This is the type of framework and architecture that allows us to build beautiful experience. And what does that experience look like? So this same hub that exists to manage your sovereignty and your reflection act, your proxy and agent, it's also an app that you can run, like a Slack app. So when you run this app, you run on this idea that because all of these data are unified, you're no longer trying to just establish your login and account. You already have that. You're participating in a network. The network has multiple types of cards and data that can flow back and forth between them. So you worry about different things. What network am I part of? What is something I need to attend to, a queue that's been already unified through the discovery engine we've talked about? What environment? Is it private between two people? Is it public? Is it declared to a public sphere? So you know that is this shared with people that I can share private information, or is this something that I need to worry about reputation? We can do that uniformly, whether you're publishing a history of something, a blog post, or some private data around a transaction or legal agreement. And we want to maintain, remember the screenshot example? This idea that you can save these things that exist into your own personal collection. Not necessarily downloading to your computer, but certainly be able to index, hey, this is my stuff, this is my library, these are the things I want to bring to the world, bring out of the world, regardless whether they exist on your computer, on the cloud, or on the blockchain. And you can search them, obviously. And finally, the ability to configure it, whether that's changing things that has just a feel, making things look pretty and changing the text, or configuring the rules of whether something can be approved below a threshold of $20,000. These are all things that can be consistently applied. Why is this so important to create all these kind of what we call edges, the things that supports the underlying center spot, the little gray spot in the middle? It's because the more we extract out of the card, the actual unit information people care about, the capability exists outside of it, the more you can simplify the creation of new cards that deal with arbitration. They don't have to worry about libraries and who you are and what environment. They just have to represent what is an arbitration request, what goes into it, who gets routed to it, and then the system will just take care of it. Like once you have an email system, all kinds of stuff can happen on them. And at the end of the day, whether that's something as flimsy as a private message or as boring as a sales report, just becomes a unit information that developers of this new decentralized internet can just focus on that nugget of information, those nugget capability, the ability for you to create and grok it, and then know that the environment around this common operating environment will take care of all the complexity. And we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like. So you've got these 4 cards, but because it's so easy to make the cards, it's so narrow and focused, and they can account on what's there, there's likely going to be a proliferation, hopefully open source, we'll talk about that in the next section, why open source is important, of all things that can do all kinds of capability around reflecting ownership title, dealing with settlements of payments, and dealing with VIP lists on things that is about invitation to an important event. All of this information today in the application silo exists in different websites and different news feeds, and a lot of times you have to download an Excel and try to make sense of it. But with a card UI system, a card-based user experience around the concept of hub and this environment, these things will work together very nicely. So at the end of the day, we focus on receiving a card from a person, a network, or a group of people that we interact with. And from that receipt, we can decide whether to save it, shape it, and put it in our own collection so we have it forever. It's the beautiful feeling to say, don't give me a URL, just email it to me. And for people who use Gmail, that means that you can search it forever, tag and organize it. We want to do that for everything that's not email-based. And cards can have that capability where you can go and index it and search it in your collection. You want to modify it, and this is assisted by tools that's consistent. It's pretty annoying sometimes to use one system and know how you can configure and change the name of something and go to another system. It's totally inconsistent and different. But if by providing this uniform way of modifying cards, we can really make it easier for people to learn how to do all of these things that's in these different cards in consistent way. And finally, when you're ready, publish it, whether it's to the blockchain or to the cloud or to something we don't even know about. So we call this the 4 edges, where we provide the edges to support the cards, the 4 edges of the card in different way from the left, bottom, right, and top. To be more concrete, people say, well, this is such a complex thing, it only work well on a desktop app. But the truth is that your phone has 4 edges too. So for people who have used a lot of mobile app with menus on the left or right, this is how 4 edges run. It docks in the different location. You can consistently find this no matter what you're looking for. Right now we're dealing with ownership title, or maybe we want to transfer that. And it happens that the other person used another identity scheme that's tied to the Touch ID or facial recognition, whatever it might be. So we can chain different cards, possibly from different teams and vendors and providers together from within this 4 edges interface. Both on the desktop, when you're completely sovereign and you control your decentralization to be peer-to-peer, but also on things where you need a cloud services running on your behalf. So the goal here is with cards These concepts of these card catalog gets mixed and matched into different reusable containers. Now, reusable containers is not a concept for end user. We're not asking people to create new templates and drag and drop things. But developers would like to have a shortcut. If they say, I want to make a tool to tell stories. So, oh, there's actually a container that we already made that is kind of like a content management system. It does things like Medium or does things like slides. And then these cards can just drop right in. And someone can say, well, I'm not trying to make a content management system. I'm trying to create news feeds, not just for social, but maybe for discovery within a certain vertical community. Now they can drop any type of cards that is compatible into that discovery container with filters and taxonomy. Someone say, no, I actually want to build an application that allows people to go back and forth and negotiate and use the power of conversation and norms and negotiation, all the soft skills, we just call them, to be able to conduct business, especially if the dollar amount increases. Then they would probably want to take cards and drop them into a conversation container. And finally, at the end of the day, what is powerful and amazing about blockchain is that it's not just a way to entertain yourself or to waste time. It's actually have the potential to create transaction and movement of money and titles and property around this concept of this digital reality. And so there are certain things such judgments and fingerprints and identity that will be participating to making real changes with real impact, especially with government system, might be something that actually creates new reality for people. And so this idea of being able to create all of these tools without really worrying about whether they're curated by a person or emergent behavior, these are all things that with this card and container system, you can mix and match and create app or dApps or decentralized app in a way faster area. So zoom out to recap, we believe that if we have a card catalog and we have the ability to create this cohesive experience around this reusable components, starting with narrated discovery and conversation workflow, basically CMS, Facebook newsfeed, Slack and chat, and pretty much other business system that does workflow. We have the opportunity to use that layer, this cue cards, the ability to direct one person from one thing to the other thing, help them make the decision to negotiate between things that are local to them, things that are on the web, and things that is decentralized. Doesn't really matter. And the blockchain, which is mystical to most people, is now demystified. It is just a layer underneath these decentralized, or in some case centralized app to provide either a permissionless blockchain where anybody can participate, or permission blockchain where you need to be a member organization or member individual to participate. And let's not forget that blockchains is not a place. Blockchain is just a data structure and a protocol that runs on either your computer, if you're running your own Bitcoin node, for example, or run something on the cloud, someone else's computer. It doesn't need to be one of the cloud provider, but it could be anywhere where there is an expectation of value and payment, where you help, someone is doing it for you. So that range of capability supports, from a deployment point of view, this cohesive experience as a method going forward. So this is our proposal, and this is what we built towards. Now let's pause for a second and say, what does this all mean? And I think at the end of the day, when we have a new technology, when we have a new ingredient to how we orchestrate software and orchestrate activity and users around them, we have an opportunity to solve what was broken or wrong or imprecise or imperfect in the business model in the past. Every technology is a new opportunity to do something right, not just for technology's sake, but correct mistakes in the past. And if you think about what happens in the internet business model today, is that we're really trying to accomplish four things, right? From the vision and the idealism of the web and the internet. We want it to be open. We want people to do what they want to do and not be restricted and not be censored and not be unpermitted to do things that are maybe not right to other people. You have the ability to express yourself on this internet, which is, as it's designed, decentralized. But you also want to be able to get a fair share reward. This open system, especially as things move online, move digital, have to be able to be economically sustainable for its participant. If I do something of value on this internet or the future decentralized internet, I should get a fair share of my reward. And that sometimes is in opposition to openness. You want to be open, don't make any money. You want to make money, be closed. And that's the type of diametrically opposed axes that has been the kind of struggle, even for people who are idealistic to decide which side they want to be on in each what aspect of their lives. Orthogonally, we also want to be able to give the user power. The internet is going to enable you to do things you couldn't do before. On the other hand, we know that we want growth. We want the market to get to as many people. And for that, convenience is important. Growth hacks, ways to get people maybe take away from their choices to make it easier to get something. And that sometimes counterbalance what power is. You know, I'll do it for you, don't worry, and you become less powerful, but maybe happier for a while. And that type of range means that there are many types of intersection that exist that is kind of like a stable corner. If you're a developer and you know how to use open source software and you know how to share and use software and download them and deploy them in GitHub, you are in a good position, right? Because you have a tremendous amount of power. You control the code and you can write and do whatever you want, deploy wherever you want. And you can change and modify any software you want. If you don't like the way it works, you just change the code. But most people are not there because they're not developers. On the other hand, if you participated in the Bitcoin and more recently the Ethereum ecosystem, you realize that the market has grown leaps and bounds for you, and you've more than been rewarded fairly for your contribution and belief early on. And so if you know how to trade crypto, you probably are pretty happy with 3, maybe 10 or 100 happy face. And that growth and that reward is going on. For most of everybody in the world, outside of developers in GitHub, and crypto people with their own wallets and cold storage, you are in these other corners. I got to give Apple and Steve Jobs and the team over there a lot of credit. The App Store has created an amazing translation of power to users' devices. The apps that exist from the first iPhone to the last one, the 10th and 9th, whatever the number is, it's not only amazing in its technology, but also has rewarded many, many developers who has built iOS app fairly for their work that they've done. On the other hand, if you are a Facebook user or any social network, you feel and you understand the ability for you to have a widely popular and pervasive network. You can reach anybody. They have grown and you've grown with them. And in that network, you have a lot of openness within the tools they give you. But if you want to get paid, you get a fair reward for your work, even if you're a publisher providing articles to Facebook to enrich that audience, you're not going to get very far. It's a different dimension. It's a different corner of this ecosystem. Pick one of the 4 corners. But if you actually analyze a little deeper, there's actually not as pretty of a sight. The truth is that as people decided on the App Store to stop paying for apps, how many times have you paid $1.99 for an app in the last 6 months? Very few. It's in-app purchase at best, but most likely freemium, right? Somewhere, or even free advertising supported, especially in the Android ecosystem, right? It's probably not as fair the reward. That's deteriorating. That's moving back to the center. And for Facebook, it's like it's ultimate, openness, and they're still growing like wildfire, and many, many people are using it. And Facebook, etc., all the apps that they have either acquired or facilitating is really kind of the definition of what we call tech titan and digital superpower. And you're talking about Facebook and the economy. But that openness is eroding day to day. It is their system. You're living in their house. You're couch surfing in their domain. So it's their rules. So the question is that it? Is this the end of the model? Put it on a plaque and say the internet is these 4 corners and will never mix. And we know that that's not the case. This is a dynamic system. Eventually, we will find a way to balance and maybe even integrate these forces. But I think we have to acknowledge that these 2 communities on the upper left and lower right is a powerful community that's gaining strength every single day. Right? Open source is growing because not only is developers starting to do open source, we're seeing designers and product people understand this ability to share, to make more meaning out of the collaborative work in the greatest success of decentralized work orchestration, right? Around GitHub and these other open network outside of GitHub. In the crypto economy, we wouldn't be talking about this opportunity if not because of the growth of attention and raw intellectual investment in new models of what crypto and what blockchain can bring. So what if, instead of saying, let's grow this community independently and try to make it as big as possible within these quadrants, that we say, we bring these communities together. Open source, it's not that far from being able to add a little bit of user experience and to be more like a product that you buy on the App Store, download the App Store, to be able to use it as not just a way to build a website, but allow each of the website using the open source and the app and dApp to connect with each other in a federated, decentralized basis. So that's already happening. We're seeing, for example, people building decentralized Twitter using open source as the driver, using the open standard from W3C as the template to move closer to the territory of the digital superpower, whether it's on the advertising support side or proprietary cloud. And we also see in the crypto economy, the token people starting to go into thinking about apps and how do you pay for them on the fair reward side, and maybe seeing that the decentralized blockchain as a type of network, a network effects, as powerful, as quickly growing, and can we bring more people and more capability into that network? So I think it's not hard to see that if we somehow find a way to merge and coordinate and combine those communities, you may be able to get the future internet we all want. And that's essentially what we think is possible, that we can, with a new idea, and I think Cardstack has a vision and other people have other competing vision as well, but I actually believe it's one vision. It's about orchestrating these open source software that is funded and backed and made sustainable and made real and made fairly rewarding using the crypto economy, not only in the buoyancy that it has today, but the ongoing sustaining power of an economy that is about network effects and about everybody buying into it. And that allows us to bring openness, user power, fair reward, and market growth all together and take away from this compromise that we have to choose into one thing that's in the center. So how does this work? So for us to think about how we can achieve that economic vision, we have to think about why are we having trouble in the first place. And I think we want to see from the open source world and crypto world that they brought essentially two key concept, a new ingredient that we didn't have before. The first one from the crypto world is the concept of wallet. A wallet means that by having token in your wallet, in your account, you have the ability to pay your way through things. You can say, if I want to do this action, I'll give you a little bit of my token or my Ether or my Bitcoin. Now, whether it's automated or not is part of the software, but there's certainly an idea that every user with a wallet is a paying customer. That gets rid of one of the most difficult problems of running a startup, which is the fact that you have this amazing expensive cost of people and the server and hosting, but most people can't come in and grow and join you unless you discount that friction for free. With crypto wallet, that friction no longer is there. Right? You can assume that with the right user interface and orchestration that people can pay the way through. So every user is a paying customer. That's step one. Step two is to think about software as well as services. Open source has a lot of times sit on that software. It's just code that sits somewhere, you download it, and you have to run it yourself. And by the time, even company who loves open source, and I gotta say, some of the biggest digital company and digital superpowers are actually hosting companies, right? They take open source software they either use or create, and they combine it and add some beautiful, decorations on them, and they use the massive ability to run this cloud infrastructure to run that service, and in so doing, create a bit economic value for them that may not exist for someone who just download a bunch of Google software and say, well, it cost me $500,000 just to run this cluster. I don't really need to do it. Let me use WordPress. So software and services are both available in the open source ecosystem. The same software that runs the analytics for Netflix is probably available for any data scientist to use. But there's a lot of friction between having that code and being able to provide the service. But that exists. The open source code gives you most of what you need to run the software as well as operate the software at scale, both decentralized and centralized. Now, so how do we connect these in a way that makes it so that it creates this new reality? And the idea here is the concept of smart contract. And the smart contract is basically saying that there is a piece of code that would then split the money and pay people. That's essentially what smart contract does. So the user have a wallet, and when they use software, let's say the Cardstack software, this smart contract splits the money between who wrote the software and who's maintaining it and who is running the service and keeping it up, right? And that is really all the app contract needs to do. Now, obviously, in the world of smart contract programming, people are writing new things from scratch. But if you think about software, it's pretty simple. You just have to figure out what went into it and kind of figure out what to split it. So that's all very similar, whether you're doing an accounting system or legal system or messaging system. We can generate a smart contract given who is involved and what's involved and be able to pay the service in software. So that's kind of the role of smart contracts. The goal here is that the user doesn't care. Right? The user doesn't even know it's a wallet if we do it correctly. The user just uses the software, this cohesive experience with all the parts and narrative and software, conversation workflow, it's all blended together. The wallet, while the user's using it, is using the application contract to pay these software and services. And so the question is, what about decentralized app or dApps? They have their own tokens. Well, it turns out that once you have digital currency or digital money, you can swap one for the other one. So let's allocate some of these users' wallet share into whatever tokens necessary to pay for storage or pay for domain name or create new identity and ask for jurisdiction and arbitration requests. That can all be blended together in this allocation function. The problem that runs into is that every application is likely going to need a different set of software services and dApp tokens. So when the next one and the third one comes out competing, you have to figure out how they allocate. And then very quickly, you get into this mess. And this is only 3. I don't even know how to draw a fully connected matrix of 45 applications people are using, different entry points. And that's really complicated. But the good news is that the user doesn't really care. The user sees this cohesive user experience, and behind the scenes, you figure out how to allocate it. And anybody who knows anything about blockchain is that it's so early that every single one of these lines I draw costs some amount of Ether or Bitcoin to run. And it's going to get pretty inefficient pretty fast as far as actually economically unfeasible to create a way where you get micro pennies from every single time someone clicks on the image because you're hosting the image for other people. So we can't continue drawing these lines because then the system basically all becomes insolvent because you're basically paying fees 95% of the time. So let's start over. So let's just erase all these lines that connect it fully and say, what if we create an intermediary, right? So a concept called reward pool, where every application essentially allocate its value, what the customer paid it, into this reward pool and say, I trust the reward pool to periodically reallocate and compensate the type of applications and services and dApp tokens that is needed to keep the users happy, right? So there's a little bit of magic here. We'll talk a little bit more in the next section about how that all works. The goal here is that the user really doesn't care. They mix and match what they want, and they're happy. It's open, right? If you need to use a PDF thing inside something, sure. If you need to use a digital signature thing, sure. Plop a card in there. And based on that usage of the card, we will allocate some amount of your spend as your user, or lawyer or something like that, into that application or that dApp and buy the token, and everybody's happy. And for developers or people who are making application or creating a new making a living in this new decentralized world, they know that if they have the right signals into this reward pool, and we have to talk a little bit about how that all works later, they will be allocated a fair share. So one way to think about this is that at the end of every month, you check your wallet and suddenly you realize that a very popular thing you did, whether it's software or even content in the future, we'll focus on software and services now, has made you $40,000. Right? And that's great because you've added value to this ecosystem and the reward function recognizes it and compensated you, and that could be your team or yourself. So that's the basic idea of a reward pool. So let's take a little bit of a step back and say, okay, so this is the patterns that we want to achieve, but how do we do this using blockchains. And more specifically, what kind of token mechanism, what kind of design of the way these different blockchain ledger interact with each other will allow us to achieve this type of mix and match and fair compensation. So let's look into this. So there's 4 concepts here. There's a wallet, an application contract, software and services, things that actually get used, and then a reward pool. At the high level, we want to be able to register the tokens that the user owns and register things that they have spent and whatever it might be. And then when they want to be able to send some of those tokens through a scheme to be discussed into an application contract to create a retainer of sorts, a prepayment. I was like, hey, it's like a Starbucks card or like a gift card. I want to put $10 or $50 into this. And when I use it, I redeem that when I actually use those software and services. And based on that, we can reward the people who contributed to this. So let's get more concrete on this. This system that we are designing, and we have built most of this, and we'll open source and show people how we've done that, it starts with Ethers. We are building this on the Ethereum ecosystem because it's the first successfully massively scalable in terms of people who are participating, but we need to be careful about how much we do for each transaction. But what the user can definitely do, and we've seen this a lot, is that they can purchase tokens. And we are introducing a token called the Cardstack token. And it's just a token that reflects the orchestration and the relationship between people and the participant. And beyond the currency, it provides rules and regulations and norms and incentive and disincentive to make this ecosystem work as a layer on top of the basic currency and securing of the ledger that Ethereum provides. And one of the main features is that we want to be able to convert these tokens that you purchase into ways that you can fund an application. And that's the conversion process from something that is tradable, this token, into this basic coupon. This idea is that I'm depositing this value into this application contract. We call that the software and services coupon, SSC. And this allows us to basically keep track of when you use it, right? When you use the application on your phone or whatever device, we just go back to the contract, the redemption contract, and say, just burn this, right? Check it, tear it up. This has been used. That does not create any type of kind of a payment to anybody, but it provides signal to the reward contract to distribute this token to other people, that all the people who contributed to it. And then that contribution that you get when you get the monthly deposit, maybe more often than that with more scalable blockchains in terms of throughput and volume, you can either trade it for other type of things that the Ethereum token can give you, or put it back in the system for your own use, for other applications that you use. So that's the ability to fungibility. So let's just kind of quickly go through again. We use the Ethereum virtual machine to create these application contracts. And the uniqueness here is that we believe that many applications, accounting application, photo, media application, probably wants to be rewarded or monetized through the smart contract. So instead of asking everybody to write and hard code it, we generate it. We have the ability to allow you to just tell me the terms of how you want to price your thing, whether that is a ratio of cost or some monthly subscription fee or some other future model that logic allows us to do, and we'll help you create your contract. It's your contract. It's under this network. It participates in a reward pool, but you have a lot of control over it. And more importantly, it's also upgradable. If you change your mind and things that ability, we've created an architecture so we can use Ethereum smart contract as a way to create migration without moving the ledger around you, spending a lot of gas. So for the token that we generate as the kind of group agreement among this decentralized apps built on the Cardstack framework, we have a peer tradable token that you can purchase, and you can use that, and you can also redeem it once you have it for this credit. The credit is what you deposit into a particular application, and that is, once you put it in it, it's non-transferable, right? Once you buy a gift card, you can't say, give me back cash on it. It's in that particular domain, or that store, that particular commercial agreement. But there's another aspect that we want to make sure that we accomplish with this coupon idea, this dual token approach, which is that we can keep the actual surface coupon lined to some sort of price, right? So it doesn't get more expensive as the, let's say, CST becomes popular and it becomes more expensive to buy in the aftermarket. It does not make a service that you're using to run an accounting system more expensive. The conversion is done in between the reward cycle and the registration cycle, but you're going to get your money's worth for the type of token you've aligned. So we want to create a stable currency on that one. So looking at it as a little bit more detailed mechanism, we still have the registration, redeem, and reward cycle. The big breakthrough, I think, in our thinking around how to get a lot of people using blockchain is to not require them to get tokens, at least right now, right? So we want to allow people to be able to buy software that is backed and monetized through this type of application contract directly using a credit card as they use today, right? And that's this particular throw. We want them to use the fiat currency, which is a credit card, to do a direct purchase of users' credit. And this is what we call a custodian contract, which is that it's not magic. We're just saying that there is an organization, it could be multiple around the world, they work kind of like exchanges as they do today, that would basically say, oh, okay, you want some service credit, let me do it for you. You give me regular money, like fiat currency, and I'll go and acquire the Cardstack token, convert them, put them in the reward pool and stuff like that, so that you now have the credit in your application contract through this coupon. And once that's done, then you realize that the user only cares about one thing, is that they care about using the app. They don't care or get a kickback. It's like a reward. It's really for the people who produce that software and help it run. The users, the main reward is being able to use it and do what they need to do. So all these signals about usage and what code you use essentially help inform what we call a proportional attribution and allocation model, which is who did what to whom stuff and how do we make sure everybody get fairly compensated. We'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit. But with that information, we can then say periodically, as a way to both save transactional costs, but also a way to give us a way to look at a set of timing activity to make that determination. We would then say, hey, reward contract, this is the ratio you should put out. And that goes into the registration contract. Everybody who participates is now happy. The question now becomes, this cycle of around this ring is really designed to incentivize people to do the right thing. At the core of this is who gets what is really important. So we spent a lot of thought and time thinking about what this attribution and allocation model ought to contain. Now, let's just be clear. This is the beginning of a thinking around what the way to fairly distribute this economic value is created when we work this way. And this is just the first place. But I believe that it will contain these things. The first thing to determine who gets paid what is to look at the actual opinions. What do people think each other deserve? So if you're an application developer, you may make a public declaration. It's like, I love you all. I want to give 50% of everything I make to open source to facilitate future people to be able to, make a living or something. Or it could be a private agreement to say, oh, it's a consulting project, you get half of this. It's almost like a record deal. When musicians signs up, they make an arrangement, some better ones and some worse ones. And we want to be able to allow people to have these kind of relationships and declare, among the team itself, how they're going to split the money, right? And finally, sometimes you may have sold your future revenues. Like, oh yeah, I sold my future royalties. It's called Bowie bond, where a musician sells the future royalty in exchange for a lump sum check. You want to be able to do that. So maybe the person who benefits from this reward cycle is not necessarily the person who did the work. It just be whoever is now owning the rights to collect on that revenue. So that's all that data that's coming from both on-chain and off-chain and analyzing things like GitHub and looking at contract within Cardstack contract. The other side is a little bit more objective. We want to know exactly what got redeemed. So this is the proof of burn. We're looking at the coupon in the blockchain as it's being deducted, as usage comes in, who has redeemed what. And that's information that's available. You don't need to have the blockchain to tell you by doing transaction on it. You can just look at the blockchain as almost like a reference table and figure out where that is. And the other thing is that the nice thing about open source is that open source code is incredibly easy to analyze. You can see what software used what library to do what it does. And you can see how software evolved and forked and merged and recommitted. All that stuff, the dependency, both in terms of code and in terms of the packaging and deployment of this stuff using in the JavaScript universe, which we are part of, NPM is a package manager for Node software. We can find and trace back, what package was derived from what and how much value they added. And finally, the immediate usage data. At the end of the day, we know, with the type of cloud infrastructure or even blockchain infrastructure, how much is being used. Right? When something gets called and something gets done, there is a record. Hopefully, we did it do in a way that can leverage privacy innovation around blockchain, but also requiring that people who use the classic universe protect and anonymize at a code level the user data when it's for this purpose of determining usage. So it's as much data as you need to determine the share, but not so much that you're sharing too much private data about what's actually happening behind those aggregate statistics. So it's really a matter of balancing facts and opinions, right? Facts are then ranked and filters based on who's likely going to be authoritative or who are spammy and who are not to be trusted because they have faked certain things or created a lot of GitHub projects just to try to take revenue share. We can use network analysis and filtering techniques and momentum-driven approaches to figure out what is actually true using data science. And on the opinion side, we want to be able to say, hey, how much stake do you have? Are you a person with a lot of contribution, a lot of potential reward, and your opinion probably have more weight than someone coming to the network for the first time? And that's kind of related to the staking model that we've seen in the blockchain. We're leveraging that. But the key here is that we're balancing both the facts and the opinions as a way to determine what is, in this cycle, the right distribution for this not just one piece of software, but all the participants in this cycle. And that weighted reward is what the attribution allocation model is an end result. Now, once we have this model determined, then we have the reward function distributing it out. And where does this go? So let's take a little bit of a look at how people are going to be able to see themselves as part of this reward function. The first one is essentially the material cost. Like there is a likelihood, and we see this every day. Even in the blockchain world, the most popular wallet is Coinbase, right? It's a hosted cloud solution that makes it easy, and they do most everything for you. You don't have to deal with safety deposit box. It's all done. And that is cost something, someone doing something for you. There's a material cost involved in providing that services. Let's cover that, right? Because that allows for two things to happen. One, it allows you to not be subsidized, so you know that your activity will actually keep that operation going, right? The same way you hope that by paying taxes, your role will continue to be there. Like that particular active funding means that it is sustainable for those things. But the other thing is also because I believe that a way to figure out what the developer gets, the team that actually provide the value, is to measure exactly how much value add they provide on top of those services. That is the material cost. If a team is providing a lot of support and hand-holding and amazing customer service and training, then maybe they take a lot more compared to the cost. But if a team is just like, I did some open source library, I want to get rewarded because you're using it, it will be a much smaller ratio of it. So there's an ability to dial that up. And the primary team that's providing the support will also need secondary teams that's providing these kind of common services. For example, in-app messaging, backup or notification. These applications, these little components exist in many, many applications. And there are people who say, hey, I don't know what you're doing, but I know how to do image processing. I know how to do image classification. This is my code. This is my tool. And people even today use that as a way to make sure the second tier of services can encompass it as well. And underneath that is the libraries, what we call, at least today in the world that we are in, open source software, right? The ability for open source libraries, people who build amazingly, crafty and well-architected code that create developer productivity, they can go ahead and create the open source libraries and get rewarded when those open source libraries are used in these higher, closer to user applications. On the other side, I also want to remember that code is not all there is. And sometimes we look at Silicon Valley, we see it as developer, everything is developer. The ideas, the concepts, the way the language flows, the ability for you to orchestrate and imagine a new way of working, those original ideas and design insight and user experience journey are equally valuable, in some cases even more valuable than the code that implemented. So we want to create a scheme that we can recognize and be able to measure the contribution for people to providing that original ideas. And that's really what it have to pay. These are the people who absolutely deserves it. On the other hand, if you look at what a network needs to sustain and grow and renew, is that there needs to be some concept of diversity, some new ideas, some unconventional thinking, contrarian approaches. And so any aspects of waste in this network. People put credits into application contract and not redeem them, or other type of situation where people actually want to say, I want to pay it forward, I want to contribute something to this ability for this network to grow and renew. We have this idea of a diversity function. Our goal is that it may be a small part of the network, but people who are receiving either funds and compensation diversity end up growing to become a larger provider, taking these front-facing application contract. And that type of renewal is very important. A balance of pure capitalism where whoever wins a power law, you're at the top of the food chain. But we want to make sure that we are able to allow people to grow into this through this distribution function. And that's why the reward function is less of a technical concept than an economic design for a well-orchestrated social ecosystem. In summary, this is the blueprint of what we believe is a sustainable software ecosystem. The distribution and contribution are kind of like a mining function where the work that you do, the useful work you do, is compensated. The money comes from the users. They are now all paying customers. And through the application contract, we build this reward pool over time. And at some time, some periodic time, 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, we distribute all of the reward pool function to the people, whether there's building software or building tokens or they're running analytics to govern the network. That's all done. And then the next cycle, when people use it, comes again and the reward function gets renewed. And a lot of the participants, a lot of paying customers are probably contributed to the network, and we may expand what concept of contribution beyond developers and designer and product people and cloud hosting provider and dApp designers to include more people providing value, where there's templates and type of guides and knowledge sharing between users of the system. So that's really where we want to accomplish, and we are well on our way there with the software and the protocol that we've designed. So in this talk so far, we've covered basically the first 4 sections that is included in the more long-form white paper that we publish soon, and possibly already published if you're watching this video from a couple weeks from now. And the economics model also have one characteristic I want to talk about, which is that we believe that the reward function, the way we calculate and weigh facts and opinion, is not just something that will be useful for governing this network, this particular arrangement of Cardstack application contract and its contributor around software and services and dApp, but maybe that this is a new way of doing analytic work, data science work, in a way that allows us to leverage a similar technique to not only improve and refine the model we use to create a reward function, but allows that basic technique to be applied to other ways to secure a network that is has similar characteristic that is what's being done here. And organizationally, we believe that at the root of this project is not building a new app that does some new messaging thing. We're really trying to organize the makers around the world to provide an alternative in an open source way, funded by the crypto ecosystem, both right now with the exuberance that allows us to have the ability to dare to go after companies with $70 billion of revenue a year, with tens, if not hundreds of thousands of employees working on this. I believe the world has enough talented people who believe in this vision will come together and organize around our protocol, our community, our organization, and our token to be able to come in and say, here is an alternative to use our skills to produce our decentralized experience is just as good, if not better, than what's available in this in the Silicon Valley monoculture. And I think by focusing on the user experience and tapping into expertise beyond just crypto expertise, combining crypto expertise with open source enthusiasm, we may be able to accelerate the timetable for this decentralized internet we talked about by 3 to 5 years. The tools are available, we just have to put them to work and acknowledge the community can come together. And obviously, to make this all work, we need the fuel and the catalyst for this global movement. And that's where we introduced the Cardstack token in the way it's designed. In the coming days and weeks, we'll discuss more about how we believe that we have found the funding model, the ability to create a contribution method and token availability that allows this open economy of users, customers, and contributors to be able to orchestrate it through this new token mechanism. And there will be more material around that. So, this is the channels that you can use and you can leverage to keep up to date. Obviously, Cardstack is fundamentally a technical project because we believe there's a deep technical challenge. Sometimes when we talk about user experience, we think it's painting over something and make it pretty. But the truth is, and hopefully this talk gives you an illustration, that there are some fundamental innovation and technical architecture concept that allows this thing to grow into the type of environment that we want. And that's where the monorepo Cardstack/Cardstack contains a lot of plugin. Obviously, a lot will be added, and we expect and we hope that the community will add to that and create an even larger plugin ecosystem underneath and an add-on system for the type of user experience accelerator for dApps and apps alike. We will be announcing more stuff on Twitter, so don't forget to follow us there. Slack is the primary way we communicate. We will do more of these things, meaning live streaming to take questions, to really help us and the team and invite more people to get involved. And finally, a lot of this stuff really deserve a blog post or 2 or 10. So our team will come together and bring different aspects of it around technology, architecture, cryptoeconomics, and UI and UX, and publish it and share it freely. This is really not about one project versus another. We believe this is the collaboration is the foundation to be able to unite, to be able to have a chance of fighting back against the digital superpowers of today, and really bringing the type of decentralized world that we like to see. So, since this is crypto space, please remember to always type this URL directly for safety. We will not send you email with links. We will not send you addresses in Slack. Everything will be made available via cardstack.com. There's not that many characters. Type it every single time. Put HTTPS in front of it to be extra sure, and check the certificate. This is really important to us that everybody who's going to contribute to this effort, whether it's through tokens or through your work in the code and ideas and training and languages and support and cheerleadership, all necessary in this asymmetric fight that we are about to undertake. I want you to make sure that you're safe, and please heed my word on this. A lot of people will be learning about Cardstack directly, and obviously you can follow me on Twitter. I will give you my opinions. The Cardstack Twitter will be mostly informational. You can ask me questions on Twitter, and I think those conversations will lead to much better understanding of what this can be. So, with that said, thank you very much for your time and attention. I know this is a pretty broad topic, but we want to create a situation where everybody can start from a general point of view, and in the future, when we publish more talk, we'll go deep in each area, and there will be more expectational understanding and knowledge around that. But this is important for all the people who understand any parts of this or more of it, or people who want to contribute aspects that we haven't thought about, to say, do we want a experience layer of the decentralized internet? Can we build that on top of the new consensus layer that makes this new imagination even possible to allow us to even dare to imagine there will be a world where user has the sovereignty, have control what they do, and can do more than they ever before in the silo world they are. So again, thank you very much for your attention, and we will talk again soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.